Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is Leon Vainstein speaking from Los Angeles, California. I'll start with what will be at the end. At the end, I will tell you about the uniqueness of this moment in human history. We are probably lucky, or maybe unlucky, but we are at a point that can change the course of our civilization, the fate of humanity. Gentlemen, I'm not exaggerating. I might even be understating it. Of course, we'll talk about the riots and Trump's response, about what the Democrats have planned for June 14th, which is very soon, and about the shocking information that stunned both me and Joe Rogan. During coronavirus disease in large hospitals, those whom doctors considered seriously or hopelessly ill were being put to death. I'm saying it myself, but as they say, I still can't believe it. And do you know why? They needed the beds, and these people were going to die anyway. In response to the riots organized by the Democratic Party in Los Angeles, President Trump announced that the number of raids to catch criminal illegals would be increased fourfold.
President Trump just announced that he is increasing the number of raids across the entire United States by 4 times. Yes, he's going to go on the offensive. Meanwhile, California's anti-riot laws, or laws against the anti-riot law, are no longer limited to just the Golden State. Now they are spreading from coast to coast: Chicago, Seattle, Atlanta, San Francisco, Denver, Portland, New York, Austin, Texas, and others. I'm sure I missed a few more because all of this has happened in the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, a group called is planning nationwide riots against the Trump administration on January 14th. I'm sure they'll say these will be peaceful protests. Nothing to see here. This is supposed to coincide with Flag Day, the 250th anniversary of the United States Army, and a military parade in Washington District of Columbia, as well as President Trump's birthday.
It's funny that the Democrats decided to start riots all over the country to distract from what's happening in Washington. The parade, speeches, and congratulations are on the 14th. Achievements, stories about successes. Instead, all the media will be filled with fires and demonstrations. Maybe if the Democrats are lucky, someone will even get killed.
NGOs are scattered all over the country. Look at the different regions where they've organized these protests in the coming weeks. Take a look at that. Do you think this is something organic, just something that happened on its own? This map is striking when you look at it. In just one night, the head of the Mexican Senate from the narco cartel government of Mexico is now declaring that they are annexing the southern part of the United States and will return the Mexican border to the map of the 1830s. Do you think this guy is joking? Watch. When President-elect Donald Trump was 16 days away from taking office as president to assume the position.
And I said, if we build the wall, we will pay for it, but we will do it. According to the map of Mexico from 1830, this is what the United States looked like in 1830. And this was part of Mexico. It wasn't all of Mexico. If you look, maybe a third, at least a quarter of the territory of North America was part of Mexico. And now Mexicans are demanding that Americans return the land. Here's what Nick Frides just posted on Twitter. He said that Mexicans are demanding that Americans return the land. We conquered it from the Mexicans, who conquered it from the Spaniards, who conquered it from the native tribes, who were constantly conquering each other.
It's funny. Give us back everything you took from us. Well, what we previously took back from the Spaniards, who took it from the Indian tribes, Indian, of course, who are constantly taking it from each other. It's like Russia demanding Crimea's return or Japan demanding the return of the Kuril Islands. And here's Jay Carroll, who served for 20 years on the border with the Border Patrol and has now written a book about the border under Biden.
Maybe we should put this question on the back burner for now. If we don't kick these people out of our country, they'll burn it to the ground. In fact, they're planning to burn the country to the ground this weekend. This isn't a hypothetical situation. Someday in the future, maybe in 10 years? No, no, no. These Saturday fires will start all across America. That's when we'll get that control, then I'm all for it. Hey, wait a minute. Why are we being watched? What? Let's repeal the Patriot Act, get rid of it. But to get rid of the Patriot Act and get rid of these people, we need to get rid of the politicians. People like Lindsey Graham, Jim Jordan, and many others who allowed this to continue, not the Democrats. The Democrats are spineless. They are evil people, and I say this without. That's my belief. But the Republicans are no better. They're like a softer form of evil because they're complicit in all of this. It's a single party. No, we agree on that. It's a single party.
And I agree. One party couldn't have caused so much damage to the country. Only the cooperation of the two ruling parties could have brought the country to the disastrous state it is in now. But one's own well-being depends on the party. And the urge to speak the truth and do the right thing for the good of the country is quickly replaced by enthusiasm for the prospect of ranks, orders, and, of course, money. In the Democratic Party in the last term, there was one honest senator, 1.5, I would say, Joe Manchin, and there was also a woman from Arizona. Just one for the whole Senate, practically, in Congress. But Joe has already left. He got tired. He left the Senate, but now there's another Joe. Fetterman, tall, awkward, dresses strangely, really strangely, with a tumor removed from his brain. He's also experienced that, but he's honest.
United States Senator John Fetterman is literally, I think, the only Democratic senator with brain damage. He's the one who actually comes out and says things like that. I unapologetically support freedom of speech, peaceful protests, and immigration, but this is not that. This is anarchy and real chaos.
The only Democrat who doesn't lie.
My party loses the moral high ground when we refuse to condemn car arson, building destruction, and attacks on law enforcement officers. And he's right, although he gave himself away a bit by showing how much the moral high ground matters to them. I think it's much more important to be, right? To say something objectively true. It seems to me that it's an admission that everyone else in the party cares more about moral superiority than about actually being right or accurate, or giving people what's objectively best for them. Ted says he's leaving. The Democratic senator from Pennsylvania knows what the polls show, but unlike most of his party, he has the wisdom to say it out loud. The fact that union voters in his state have just seen jobs saved and that more are on the way may help him stay focused. Democrats, be more like John. I thought there was a chance they would do that.
No, the thing is, a politician has already sold his soul from the start, and not for justice. Mayors and governors, senators, members of Congress, they already came to power for money, fame, strength, and authority, as I said. So they'll only say something that's good for us if they get something for it. What does Mark Mitchell say? That if a lot of people are doing something that's clearly bad for them, then there must be some hidden reason we're not aware of. What is it?
And yet they keep doing it. They're clearly, obviously doing it knowing that it's a losing game. So there must be some other motivation. What is it? Either Gavin Newsom wants to rule over the pile of ashes that the Democratic Party will become, and he thinks this will get him there. Maybe they think that if he leads the party, they'll be able to lie, cheat, and steal again to come to power. Maybe that's the case. Maybe they think there will be a strong backlash against Trump. Maybe there's a plan to create such a strong backlash against Trump.
Maybe.
Again, maybe that's exactly what foreign adversaries want. I really don't know. But it doesn't make any sense.
Time and again, I ask, are the Democrats defending positions that are illogical and unacceptable to the people? Well, we've already talked about this. Men and women's sports, and then there's abortion. A minute before the baby is, so to speak, ready to come into the world, and gender reassignment for children. But they know it's very unpopular, so why do they keep doing it? Who benefits from this? After all, there must be a reason they're doing all this. Maybe the goal is simply to turn the country into a blazing fire? What's interesting is that several large corporations are giving money, but these ones, all these protests.
Here's a map and a list of cities where protests against Trump will take place on June 14th. To begin with, the message and branding presented here are utterly foolish. It's almost as bad as... Do you remember that video where all the Democratic congressmen were pretending to be characters from a trailer or something like that? Everything they do is so cringeworthy, and this is just another example. And the money for this comes from Christy Walton, the heiress whose fortune is $20 billion. And she's funding many of these initiatives. They're probably using Obama's community organizing network to coordinate all these activities across the country. It's pretty wild. They tried, and we've been watching this for many months. Incite some riots, resistance, protests, resistance, and none of that worked. They managed to get a couple of boomers out to car dealerships. Tesla.
The heiress of the founder of Walmart is funding some of these riots. Well, Walmart Corporation immediately stated that they do not support or participate. The governor of California tried to score points as a future Democratic Party candidate in the 2028 presidential election. How does he manage to do that?
Let's just start with this. If Gavin Newsom wanted to challenge Donald Trump and loves attention, then he got it 100%. Look over here. Search queries for Gavin Newsom together with Donald Trump, just think about it, increased by 9,700% compared to last week. Right now, people are searching for the name Gavin Newsom together with Donald Trump more often than ever before, and the statistics have been kept since 2004. Donald Trump was able to make a name for himself thanks to his show and all his business projects. Now he's making a name for Gavin Newsom, who seems more than ready to enjoy this fight.
What are the numbers, Naslash? And how can we assess why Newsom might consider it if we're looking at this?
Look at how he's presenting it.
Why would Newsom oppose it?
Yeah, why is Gavin Newsom so eager to challenge Donald Trump? And you know, it's all about the year 2028, and it all depends on where the Democrats want to see their candidates. Should the Democrats be more active in opposing Donald Trump? Among Democrats, look, 84% of Democrats across the country say they want Democrats to oppose Donald Trump. This is no longer data. 2017, when most Democrats wanted a compromise with Donald Trump, now they want a fighter against Trump. And that's why, at least from a political point of view, Gavin Newsom is actively getting involved in the fight, because he's thinking about the future. He's thinking about the year 2028. And with an overwhelming majority, it's rare for 84% of Democrats to agree on anything except for their dislike of Trump. And that's what we're seeing right now. They want to confront Donald Trump, and that's why Gavin Newsom seems more than ready to take him on.
It's clear with the governor. Even when he's losing right now, he's making sure his party sees him as a fighter that he can win. So what's happening today with people's attitude toward the president? How does their attitude change toward him during riots?
The daily presidential rating for Wednesday shows that 52% of likely voters in the United States approve of President Trump's job performance, 47% disapprove, for a net +5. Here's what it looks like on the chart.
That is, in all the polls, more than 50%, between 52 and 60, support Trump and his policies.
Within arm's reach of the highest numbers we've ever seen. In the past couple of weeks, we've been breaking records. For the first time in 2 decades, most voters believe the nation is on the right track. And these numbers have gone up again after a few days when they were just above 40%, so everything is going up again. Here are the last 5 daily overnight polls, each with about 400 results. The newest data is at the top, the oldest at the bottom. If you look at this column with the overall approval rating, last night we had 56% approval.
I apologize for boring you with all these details, but in the United States today, even 0.5% movement one way or the other is a lot. And 40, 47, 48% to 52, even that, especially in just a few days, is what you would call a huge tectonic shift.
And if they do everything right, they might be able to deport somewhere between 800 and 2,000 people. So, in other words, you're saying that under your president, whom you haven't mentioned at all, they were letting them in. 8,000 people a day are involved, and about 20,000 people a year in Los Angeles become victims of hit-and-run accidents. And it's believed that these are mostly people who are here illegally but don't want to. Wait,
you said 20,000 hit-and-run accidents, wow.
Yes. And about 8% of accidents, 8 to 10% that end in fatalities are hit-and-run accidents.
20,000 pedestrian accidents happen every year in Los Angeles, and 2,000 of them are fatal. And most of these drivers are unlicensed, who then try to escape justice, meaning they flee the scene of the crime and later turn out to be illegal immigrants.
If you look at some of the huge problems the state is facing, for example, it was in the top 10 for school test results 50 years ago, and now it's in the bottom 10%. And in San Francisco, there's the highest per capita property crime rate. The share of the budget allocated to infrastructure is shrinking because Medi-Cal is pushing it out. And we moved on. We invented the Cloverleaf interchange. We had some of the most advanced airports and road systems, and highways 101, I-5, and 99 together are probably the most dangerous, if I can put it that way, highways in the country. Highway 99 definitely is, judging by the number of miles traveled. There are sections with only 4 lanes, and it's a real death trap. And at the same time, we have a $15 billion scam, a $20 billion high-speed rail that will never be completed. And 27% of the population was not born in the United States. So my point is, if you're going to bring in so many people, and most of them will be without English language skills or a high school diploma, you end up with a huge problem of assimilation and integration. And we no longer teach civics, and the idea of the melting pot is now out of favor, even though it worked perfectly well. And so Gavin Newsom and Karen Bass are clear examples of California's problems.
So what are our Democratic leaders fighting for? For the future of our children, for our protection, for our well-being? We pay them salaries, and not small ones, by the way, so that they serve our goals, our objectives. It's like hiring a mason to build a house, but he does anything except actually building your house. But he still takes the salary. Do you want to know something truly unimaginable? Something we couldn't even imagine before the socialists came to power? I mean, we could imagine that happening in places like East Germany, the Soviet Union, or South Africa. But interestingly, Joe Rogan had a guest, a doctor named Bowden. She talked about the practice of euthanasia during coronavirus disease. Biden's White House issued an order that no one can hold hospital doctors or staff accountable for any mistakes. And according to Bobden, it began.
Today, there is actually a trial taking place, the first in the country, with a jury regarding these hospital protocols. When they had a young woman with Down syndrome, they basically euthanized her. They issued her a do not resuscitate order, even though she didn't have one. And the father acted just wonderfully. This is the Shara M family, and they
Why did they do that? They euthanized her for what?
I saw that. I was going through the medical records of these patients, and they really are euthanizing them. They need a bed. They say, well, they're going to die anyway.
Doctors are killing patients because they need a bed, and the patients are going to die anyway. It seems to me that this sounds like premeditated, what's it called, premeditated murder.
And for what reason? Was this person in the hospital?
Coronavirus disease 19 protocols, so.
And they, wait. So they were in the hospital and they were given something to kill them.
Yes, it was all happening. Sorry, but I mean, it was really happening. People were given not morphine, but insulin. What? Yes.
It's common.
And does this happen often? Asks a stunned Joe Rogan. Dr. Bolden's answer is yes.
Yes, I have reviewed the medical records. In this situation, she was given a do not resuscitate, which means a do not resuscitate order, which means that if it seems like the person is dying, you do nothing, although in her case, that wasn't true. So they are filing a lawsuit for assault, which is one way to get around the law.
The parents of the murdered girl are suing for assaulting a child without the parents' permission. You may wonder why it's so challenging. What a ridiculous way of putting it. The thing is, the Democrats have cut off all ways to hold their hospital doctors accountable for deaths during coronavirus disease.
Because the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act is very hard to get around. The Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act protects all doctors and all hospitals from any liability for wrongdoing during coronavirus disease. That's why it was very difficult to try to get around the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act. In this case, there is hope to get around the Public Readiness and Emergency Preparedness Act because the charges are for assault, and there is currently a trial going on. It started today. It's happening in Wisconsin, so that gives me hope.
And did you think, gentlemen, that nothing could surprise you anymore? And many Democrats will shake their heads and probably say maybe it was for the best so they wouldn't suffer. And after all, they helped other people, well, those who had a better chance of survival. Minister of Homeland Security Kristi Noem said on Monday that protesters in Los Angeles are being paid and that the ongoing unrest is part of a professional operation. This is organized. These are people who are being paid for this. You can trace how they behave, the signals they give each other in the crowd and at protests to provoke violence, said Noem. She claims that the Trump administration now has evidence that the riots in Los Angeles are an organized conspiracy against the United States government, but did not disclose what exactly was discovered. Recently, declassified documents were released showing that protesters in Los Angeles were paid thousands of dollars to participate in riots against the Trump administration. The 92-page action plan was written by the CIA in 1983, and it describes how criminals and other agitators would be paid to increase discontent among ethnic minorities and students in order to provoke street riots. The secret CIA dossier reveals a scheme for hiring professional protesters to start violent riots, which are then used to overthrow and seize power in the country. United States Aid is an organization that was practically dismantled by Musk, and all it did was organize riots. This is just a facade, a peaceful protest for a planned and well-funded color revolution against, by the way, now our own government. They practiced on others before targeting us. The files, by the way, Kennedy, showed and revealed the secret CIA dossier and their plan to hire professional protesters to start violent riots. mass propaganda, political and psychological warfare, bacteriological warfare, biological warfare, global media control, regime change, and much more. There are many obvious connections between the events of that time and today, which reveal how this is done and how it continues to be done to this day. The control of mass gatherings in support of guerrilla warfare is carried out by internal secret command elements, messengers, assault squads, and placard bearers. They are used to give signals and chant slogans. Everything is under the control of an external command element, as described in the CIA manual. The intelligence officers broke this conspiracy down into several stages, starting with the front organization. Agents infiltrate groups such as labor unions or student organizations, secretly controlling them to promote anti-government ideas. Then they used armed propaganda, acting friendly, helping communities, and showing that their weapons protect people rather than control them in order to gain trust. The slogans and speeches contained simple emotional phrases to stir up the crowd and focus their anger on a specific person or the entire government. The manual suggested using small groups of trained agitators to incite the crowd at protests, creating the appearance of a huge spontaneous movement. This could include paying criminals and getting them involved. Well, it's just that regular protesters are joined by criminals who are well paid. These provocateurs incited violence and created martyrs in the crowd to turn people against the government. The CIA leadership's manual, called Psychological Operations, served as a guide for starting anti-government movements in other countries in the 1980s. For the purpose of this conspiracy, the first thing they did was to weaken the Sandinista government in Nicaragua by turning public opinion against it, winning the hearts and minds of the people. Using these tactics, the CIA hoped to create chaos through protests that would undermine the government's authority. Then the agents aimed to overthrow the regime and replace it with a United States-friendly government. Well, in Nicaragua, the CIA failed. Despite their support, the Contras rebels never managed to achieve a decisive victory. Despite significant funding from the United States, the agency tried to undermine the Sandinista government. How do you portray it as a repressive regime that controls everything possible and, so to speak, has its strings pulled by the Soviet Union? But the plan to stir up unrest and support the rebels didn't work. The Sandinista government was eventually removed in the elections in 1990. The document from 1983 was kept secret for almost 40 years before it was declassified and published in the CIA archives. Although the plan failed in Nicaragua, it gave the agency a guide for justifying violent uprisings around the world for decades to come. When personnel are placed or recruited from organizations such as labor unions, youth groups, agricultural organizations, or professional associations, they begin to manipulate the goals of these groups. This is detailed in the document. The psychological apparatus of our movement, with the help of these internal personnel, will prepare a mental state that, at the decisive moment, can turn into the most important thing, an outburst of justified violence, says the Central Intelligence Agency. This was not the first uncovered CIA plot that used public violence to influence people around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in the history of the United States, we have a government that does not want to fight, destroy, kill, or organize wars, but wants the world to finally live a normal life. That means we have a chance. And that's why the other side has thrown money, prepared agents and agencies to stop us and return the world to violence and war. But we have a chance. Subtitles created by